All right. So that last chapter in sensation and perception, like I told you the other day, I really love that stuff. But I mean, we're right in the alley of the stuff I love the best. All right. Here we got the learning theory. Oh my God, this stuff is so cool. And we're right in the area of those things that I tend to teach at the upper level. So, in fact, right now, in fact, well, at 1:30 this afternoon, right, I teach a course in learning, and so it's actually a fun course. In the entire semester is this one chapter is for the whole semester. And personally, I took learning class three separate times, entire course three times. I took it once as an undergraduate. Um, then the very next semester, I took it in my master's degree. And it was weird because I took the exact same course. Well, rephrase that. It was called learning. And it was taught by the same instructor because for my master's degree, I stayed at the same school. And it was just like night and day. It was just so radically different from each other. It was just weird. And then I took it a third time in my PhD program. And ironically, the third time was actually the hardest. I was like, what the hell? And so I think by the time I got to the third one, it was much more intense details than it had been the times previously. But yeah, it could have been. It could have been. I mean, they had a higher expectation at the PhD level than they had at the master's or the bachelor's. But all right, so we're going to talk about learning, and so we'll start out with some pretty vague, what is learning kind of a thing. But then we're going to talk about some distinctly different forms of learning. We'll talk about classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and then perhaps, in my opinion, the most important and interesting of all, the observational learning. Okay, so yeah, we find that for the majority of non-human animals, what happens, in fact, I got it because I got to be able to, I like to move and highlight and stuff. So for the majority of non-human animals, when they're born, they already have inside of them all of the behaviors necessary to survive and adapt. Okay. In fact, when I teach my learning class, one of the fundamental themes that comes up across the entire course is adaptation, right? That because other non-human animals, all right, they have, like one of my favorites is snow fox. Those are cute little suckers. You know what I mean? Big fur, poofy, and cute little animals. Well, what happens is when a snow fox gets cold, it triggers a very instinctive reaction inside of a snow fox. And so what they'll do is they'll start digging with their front paws into the snow, and they'll dig a snow cave. Okay, and then they'll burrow into a snow cave. Awesome. Here's the deal, though, is that wonderful adaptive mechanism is absolutely garbage. Take that snow fox and bring it to Texas. All right. Look at the weather out there today. All right. And the Arctic fox going, oh, it's cold. I'm going to dig a snow cave. He's screwed. Right. It doesn't work. So all of a sudden, the adaptive behaviors of non-human animals in so many ways is absolutely useless once you get out of the very specific environment in which that very specific behavior has in fact emerged or evolved. So what happens is that evolution gives animals a variety of adaptive behaviors, but human beings, we can take it further. We can learn. And so, you know what? If I'm cold and I'm here in Texas, I look at that. I put on a sweatshirt. If I'm in Texas and I'm cold, I'll turn on the thermostat. If it's, if I'm cold, I'll go inside. I'll light a fire. I'll stand in the sunshine. I mean, I have so many different solutions because I, as a human, we as human beings can learn, we can adapt to any environment. If you look around the room, Human beings are the only animal species that you will find at every line of latitude. All right, you go up and down from the North Pole all the way down to the South Pole, you're going to find human beings. But there is no other animal species that is even close to that spread. It just doesn't work like that. Okay, so it's a pretty powerful thing. This thing learning, and as I say, it's just really an extension on evolutionary adaptations. Okay, that's all it is. And then we find that learning to its extreme, and we'll talk kind of vaguely at the end of this chapter about this, but at the far end, beyond your ability to learn new adaptive solutions, we as human beings have language. So not only if we figure out an adaptive solution, we can tell other people. If somebody else figured out an adaptive solution, they can call us. We can use the internet and see an adaptive solution that somebody created in Japan and use it over here if this is what we want. Okay, so we are so far beyond you're born with a set of behaviors and it's the only set of behaviors you have. You can figure out new solutions yourself to you can share those solutions with others. So we're just way advanced in this way. So learning is really the process of association. Okay, that it's just really and I mentioned this in chapter 4 way back, but if you recall Hebb's law, Donald Hebb, who was a neurologist, and he said what happens is you got different neurons in your brain, and what happens is if two neurons are firing at the same time, they connect to each other. And so Hebb's law is neurons that fire together wire together. Okay, that's the basis of the neural basis of learning. Neurons that fire together wire together, and that's what associative learning is all about. Is that when two things are occurring at the same time, whatever. When two things are occurring at the same time, these things connect to each other. Okay. So we'll talk about some distinctly different types of associative learning. Here you've got a sea slug, sea snail, whatever, it's an aplysia, and they're going to associate a splash of water with an electrical shock on its tail, whatever. With a seal, they are going to associate the behavior of a ball on the nose with getting a yummy treat. Okay? But it's still an association. We find that there's two main forms of associative learning. We've got classical conditioning, which we'll spend quite a bit of time on today, and operant conditioning, which we'll probably touch today, but won't get deep into today. Okay. So classical conditioning is often considered to be passive. Okay, it's a passive thing because here's the deal. Okay, somebody, where is it? Oh, here. So there's lightning, okay? And lightning is cool. Who doesn't like lightning? I mean, it's like a free fireworks show, right? But guess what? Lightning tends to be followed by a kaboom, scary sound. And so you see this woman, she's like, oh, she's all scared by the loud sound, okay? She thought the lightning was pretty cool. I like that lightning. It is awesome. It's a neat little light show. But this one scares me. That sound, ooh. So now, when the lightning comes, pretty soon she's already afraid. Why? Because the lightning allows this girl to predict that thunder is about to happen. Okay, so it's all about learning to predict important things. You come to associate lightning and thunder, and because you can associate these two, when you see lightning, it makes you think of thunder and it triggers the fear. Okay. So it's an important form of learning because it allows animals to predict important things are about to happen. Okay. With operant conditioning, this is not passive. This is very, very active. So up in here, I mean, whether this girl is afraid or not, thunder follows lightning. It just does. That there's this woman's reaction here has no effect on the world around her. It just doesn't affect it. It's just she's a passively sitting there and it happens. In a more active sense, you've got a situation where a child learns to associate being polite with getting a cookie. Okay. If I'm polite, then I get a cookie. Later on, the kid says, thank you and please. Okay. And so in this one, if the child does not actively do something, perform a behavior, the outcome does not occur. Okay. Does not matter what she does, the outcome is going to occur. The thunder is going to happen. The cookie only happens if the kid is actively involved in the process. Okay. So classical later. Okay, so let's talk classical conditioning briefly. Um, Ivan Pavlov is considered to be the founder of classical conditioning. He was a physiologist, okay, and he was studying digestion, and he came to realize that everything that was known about the digestive system and the process of digestion came from dead animals, right? They were doing autopsies on a dead animal and studying the digestive system. And he's like, wait a minute, the digestive system is an active system. It's, it's part of our everyday lives and stuff. And so what he did was he designed some procedures to study the digestive system of dogs that were alive. So he would do surgery on the dogs, and then he would implant in their cheeks a little test tube that could be used to collect saliva. And then once the dogs recovered from surgery, he would give them, oh, here, I'm going to give the dog, a biscuit. And how much does it salivate when I give it a biscuit? Okay, you give it a biscuit, and then you measure the number of drops of salivation in this little test tube. And that's all fine and dandy. So he's doing this for a little while, and then pretty soon he finds that, wow, the dog just sees the biscuit. I'm holding the biscuit in my hand. It doesn't even have it in its mouth yet, and it's starting to salivate. Wait, what? Why would a digestive system start working even before there was food in this dog's mouth? And then all of a sudden it was like, it wasn't even the sight of the dog biscuit that made the dog salivate, but just like the sound of the container opening that contained the biscuits. Oh shit. And then it was the sight of the person, the trainer, the trainer's being present. And then it was the sound of footsteps coming down the hall. It was like, what the hell is going on with these dogs? And so he called this salivation psychic secretions. All right, this was what he called this stuff. So he did not have a positive opinion of psychology. He did not. This was 1901. Psychology was it was not a well-established discipline at all. I don't blame him for having a bad opinion at that point in history, but pretty soon he couldn't ignore it. He could not ignore the fact that this was in the realm of psychology. And so even though he won a Nobel Prize in medicine, all right, he became one of the most famous psychologists around, right? So good stuff. I think I got everybody here. Yeah. Okay. And so here's basically an apparatus that he would use to measure salivation and to measure his designs. Yeah. So as a start, here's what basically happens in classical conditioning. Okay, there is an initial neutral stimulus. In this case, he just rings a bell. Ding ding ding. Look at that. The dog. I mean, of course, the dog's gonna like notice that you rang the bell, but there's really no real reaction. Okay? Here, if you take yummy dog food and you give it to a dog, it's going to salivate. The dog is going to, saliva is going to come out. It's going to be a mess. Okay? And so we call this an unconditioned reflex. When I say unconditioned, I mean unlearned. You don't have to learn it. The dog never had to learn that food makes you salivate. If you put food into a dog's mouth, it will just salivate. It just is. Okay? It is a reflex, and it is an unlearned reflex. Okay? So dog food reflexively triggers salivation. Okay. So now we're going to do something here. We're we're going to say during conditioning, again, during learning, okay? During learning. So, ding, ding, ding. Then you give the dog food and the dog salivates. Of course they do, because that's that unconditioned reflex we said a second ago. It just, food makes a dog salivate. I'm not surprised by that, okay? So you do this about 5 times. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 food salivate. Ding, 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 food salivate. Ding, 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 food salivate. Yada, yada, yada. Okay? And after about 5 trials, you go ding, ding, ding. You don't present any food. And do you know what happens? The dog salivates. Wait, what? During acquisition, this is where associative learning is occurring. The dog has come to associate the sound of the bell with the food. Okay? So you can see here on this slide, you see the bell is a neutral stimulus. At first, it had no meaning to this dog. It didn't mean, it was just a neutral thing. It just was. After acquisition, this bell now has a new name. It's a conditioned stimulus. It is a learned stimulus. Okay? So during these trials where we're going ding 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 food, ding 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 food, ding 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 food, it's changing from a neutral stimulus to a conditioned stimulus. Okay? A learned stimulus. And so the dog salivates, okay? Because what's happening? The dog has associated the bell with the food. The dog has come to learn that when I hear that bell, food is about to occur. And so, if you are able to predict, and this is what's happening, the dog can now predict something important. If you can predict that something important is about to happen, you ought to get yourself ready for that thing. And so the dog starts to salivate so that its digestive system is started and it can digest the food faster. Okay. So this is all that's happening. The dog can predict something important is going to happen, and they're going to prepare themselves for that important event. Okay. We find, yes, the neutral stimulus and the conditioned stimulus are exactly the same, and it changes across the acquisition, but the unconditioned response and the conditioned response are similar. That is, I said, if you put food into a dog's mouth, it salivates. Yeah, but guess what it does also? If you put food in a dog's mouth, it salivates and it chews and it swallows. After conditioning, the dog salivates, not chewing and swallowing. So though the unconditioned response and the conditioned response are similar in the sense that they're both salivation, they're definitely not the same. Okay. This is the act of eating. This is the act of turning on the digestive system to speed up the process. Okay. So classical conditioning is very interesting. At one point when I was finishing up my PhD and I was looking for a job, and faculty positions are hard to come by. So after my PhD, I went and got what they call a postdoctorate. So after you finish your PhD work, then you spend another couple of years working at a university. I worked at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. And you work at a university where you basically just do research. For 2 years, I did nothing but research. And so when I was looking for one of these postdoctoral positions, I got an interview to go up to SUNY Binghamton, SUNY, State University of New York at Binghamton. It was upstate New York. And I got to this university, and the guy's studying classical conditioning. Okay. And it was creepy crazy, man. This dude was running research on classical conditioning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had this huge room. I mean, when I went into that room, everything was red lighting, okay, so that you wouldn't distract the animals. And they were rats, okay. He was studying rats with classical conditioning. And he had just thousands of rats in this room, and they were doing little all day long, all day long, and all eat. I mean, he had his postdoctoral people 24 hours a day have to be on call. They're rotating night shift. These animals in these studies are being shifted around. You know, oh, this one spent 2 hours, now one goes there, and this one goes there, and it's just constantly going. And this guy was publishing research papers like 3 or 4 times a month. They had all these papers, but each and every time he would do it, he was digging into an itty bitty thing on classical conditioning, just the tiniest little thing you could possibly imagine. I walked out of that job interview and I'm like, why would any human being on earth care about that? Why would they? What would I understand classical conditioning is very important, but when you're like you're spending every hour of your life finding this much different than the thing before, and then this much more, than this much more, than this much more. Oh my God. I am so glad I did not take that job. That would have killed me. All right, so love me some classical conditioning, but I don't love it that much. So classical conditioning occurs in a lot of places. So, cancer patients often have to go in for chemotherapy, right? And chemotherapy, the drugs involved in chemotherapy lead to nausea. That's an unconditioned reflex. You don't got to learn it. Chemotherapy drugs make you sick. Okay? Well, guess what happens? Just before you get the chemotherapy drug, you're sitting in the waiting room. Waiting room plus drug equals nausea. Pretty soon, waiting room leads to nausea. So this is just like, food, salivate, did a ding, 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 food, salivate, did a ding, 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 salivate. So it's exactly the same setup as Pavlov's basic study, but clearly in a much more sophisticated fashion. Hmm. Or here's a really good one too. This is my last house. My last house, it had that funky plumbing that goes like this. As an unconditioned reflex, if you're taking a shower and the water all of a sudden gets incredibly hot, you jump and scream. Yeah, because it's hot. Let's say there's a neutral sound, just a toilet flushing sound. Whoosh. And then guess what follows that? Incredibly hot water. You jump and scream. So now, as soon as you hear the toilet flush, oh my God, you're panicking. Okay. So clearly, this classical conditioning is occurring in a lot of different places in our lives that are way more than just, bells and salivating and stuff. Huh? I like this one. This one was from a textbook by David Myers one time, and he describes his own scenario. Okay. He says, all right, number one, here's an unconditioned reflex. Passionate kisses lead to, oh baby, right? You know what I'm talking about. Do I need to teach you the birds and the bees? Not today. Well, he describes a girlfriend he had in college that loved onion flavored potato chips. And so, as his girlfriend starts to lean in to kiss him, he smells onion breath. And that is followed by a passionate kiss, which leads to ooh la la. And so now, as an adult, when he smells onion breath, he gets his freak on, right? I don't know. I mean, that feels far fetched to me, but you know what? Not really. Because this basic model right here, this exact same idea, is the principal explanation for sexual deviancies. Why are some adults attracted to young children, right? Why are some, why do these, and oh my God, there's some crazy sexual philia. They call them philias, paraphilias. There's some crazy paraphilias out there. And this is the explanation, all right? It's just, there just happened to be this present when this happened. It's weird. It's some weird shit. Okay. Okay. So during that first phase of classical conditioning, it was called, as we said, acquisition. So this is the time when you're going, did a ding, 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 food, salivate. Did a ding, 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 food, salivate. Did a ding, 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 food, salivate. So during this time period, as we said, the bell is initially a neutral stimulus, and it is through this process that it becomes a conditioned stimulus. Therefore, the association becomes acquired. Okay, that's why it's acquisition, to be acquired. And you see what happens here on this little graph on the right is that here is the not just time, but number of times you've gone did a ding 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 food salivate, did a ding 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 food salivate. Okay, so this is number of trials or something like that. Okay, and this is the strength of conditioned response. So at any given time here, if I just went did a ding 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 with no food, how much would the dog salivate? At the beginning, nothing. Then, and we can see what's happening here is this is the strongest learning that's going to occur. Okay, the most salivation that you're going to get in response to the bell. It's going to asymptote off. I don't think I have a good picture. Sometimes I'd rather have a whiteboard than anything else. Yeah, I don't have it. So if we kept this going, if we kept going, did a ding 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 food salivate, did a ding 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 food salivate, this thing would just level off. Okay, it hit its maximum associative strength. It can't go any higher. Okay? So here's what happens during acquisition. So now, as I said, you've created all this learning as reflected by salivation. And so now what do is you go, okay, I'm going to go into what they call extinction. So I'm going to go ding ding ding, no food. And the very first time I go ding ding ding, no food. Look at that. The dog is salivating like crazy. Of course it is. Then I do it a second time. Ding ding ding, no food. The dog still salivates, but look at that, a little less. Ding ding ding, no food. Look at that. And so each time you go ding 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 and do not include food, the dog begins to salivate less and less and less. So this is the acquisition of the association. This is the extinction of the association. Okay? So acquisition, extinction. It's a beautiful process. What happens, however, and this is important right now, extinction does not mean forgetting. At this point, you go, ding ding ding, no food, ding ding ding, no food, ding ding ding, no food, ding ding, no food, ding ding ding, and the dog is like, no, I am not salivating. Okay, the dog did not forget that the bell predicts food. This dog just says, at this moment, it's not true, but I don't forget that it happened in the past. Okay, because what happens is if you acquire it, extinguish it, acquire it, extinguish it, put the dog away, put him away for the night, have a nice evening, I'll see you in the morning, you bring the dog out, look at that. At last night, when you put the dog away, had zero response, was showing you zero behavior. You bring him out and you go, ding, 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 look at that. Dog starts to salivate again. They call that spontaneous recovery, right? So that even though you extinguished it, it still comes back. All right, it pops back in a new day, and then you can extinguish it again. And it's really interesting because if you put the dog away again and then bring him out a third day, and you go ding ding ding, and they're going to respond, but just less than they did the last times, right? And it'll keep going, keep going. So it's very, very clear that this spontaneous recovery shows that extinction is not forgetting. It is simply the no longer exhibiting a behavior, right? But the dog still remembers. Right? I like that. So classical conditioning by itself is interesting, but it's limited. Okay, that as I said at the very beginning, that non-human animals basically have inborn instincts and reflexes that allow them to adapt to their environment. We have the ability to learn new things that allow us to adapt to our environment. But if we had to learn every single individual adaptive thing, we would be helpless. Instead, what happens is we generalize. Okay. And so, in fact, in Pavlov's work, I don't even know about the drool, the rubbing one, but I know that if you go ding ding ding, meat salivate, ding ding ding, meat salivate, ding ding ding, meat salivate. Got it. Set it up, and then you go dong dong dong. How's it all going to react to that? Because it was did a ding 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 meat, right? It wasn't a dong dong dong. What the heck's the dog going to do? And the dog is going to basically look at this new sound and say, how similar is this new thing to what I already have experienced? And it will salivate in an amount that is reflective of how similar they are. Okay. This is called generalization. And I'm going to show you an example of generalization with my dog to bring it apart. However, there's also the idea of discrimination. Discrimination is the idea that in some cases, an animal will not take its already previously known knowledge and broaden it, but instead will tighten it up and I'm going to show you an example of that as well. So it's easy, better to show an example. Okay? Here it is. Here's my dog. Well, no, he's not my dog anymore. It's one of those things, you know how that goes. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. Now, the last time I was, like 3 years ago, I was overseas. I was in China, and then I was over in Korea. And my wife was with me in Korea, and then I came back to America a week before her. And I got back to America, and I had to make a decision about my dog because he was old, and he was sick, and he was blind. He had so many health problems. So I had to make, and this is the hardest job Dad's ever had to make. All right, Dad had to make the decision about whether it's time to euthanize poor Haru. And I'll tell you, that was a hell of a shock when I picked my wife up from the airport and bring her home, and then say, "Oh, by the way, guess what I had to do while you were gone?" Oh shit. But anyway, Haru was awesome. So he loved people. I mean, just could not get enough of people. Okay. He did not learn this. This is an unconditioned reflex inside of that dog. Okay. Number one, I mean, this is just in all dogs' genetics, but Haru was a Shih Tzu. And Shih Tzus are just bred for one specific purpose, and that is just to be cute and love you. That's it. They just, other dogs at least have a purpose, oh, to help you on a hunt or, to guard you or something. No, they were bred for one reason, to be cute. I mean, look at how cute that is. Look at, he's wearing, this was a Green Bay Packer windbreaker that I had bought originally for my nephew when my nephew was a baby. And then when my kids were around, both of my kids wore this little Green Bay Packer windbreaker. And now there's a dog, and it's cute as hell, but they pee on it. So it's not really, but it's cute. Makes for nice pictures. All right. So here we go. We had a situation here where, right, people in the house leads to an excited dog that runs around like a crazy man. Okay, so the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, you've got the unconditioned reflex, no learning occurring. This is just the way dogs run. Okay. Now, there's a sound, a stimulus, a neutral stimulus. Ding dong. Okay. And guess what? That's followed by people in the house. Ooh, people. I love people. You know what I'm getting at, right? So pretty soon, he hears the doorbell. Oh my God, he goes running to the door. He is ready, man. The condition response. So what happens is that, as we said, the doorbell allows my dog to predict, in particular up in here, the doorbell allows my dog to predict that something important is going to happen. And therefore, if you can predict something important is going to happen, look at this. Dog's going to go to the door to prepare himself to receive that thing. Okay. So that's some really good classical conditioning, right? And we can imagine in terms of the Pavlov thing, right? This was like meat salivate, Ding, 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 meet, salivate. Ding, 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 salivate. So it's exactly the same type of a layout as Pavlov's, just different behaviors, different stimulus. So then what would happen is, we're sitting in the living room watching some show or something on the TV, and there might be a doorbell sound. But, my doorbell is ding dong, and maybe on the TV it's like ding ding. How does he respond? It was very, very clear that if that sound on television was very similar to mine, my dog would jump up and run to the front door. Okay. But if it was relatively different from mine, like a ding ding or something like this, he might just lift his head up and look around and go back to sleep. And so the amount of response that he showed was a direct relation to how similar was that doorbell to my doorbell. Okay? And so that was clearly generalization. That was the whole idea of that. But then my kids and I were uh, a little evil, right? And so we downloaded some app on our phone that allowed us to generate doorbell sounds, various doorbell sounds. And just because I guess we were super cool, we also had a little wireless speaker to send the little doorbell sounds, and we could plant the wireless speaker in various parts of the house. And so we would kind of play the doorbell sound and see how it would affect him. And after we played around with this, the idea was that we were playing all these different doorbell sounds, and there was never followed by people in house. And so, pretty soon after playing around with poor Haru and playing with all of these different doorbell sounds, pretty soon, guess what? Discrimination occurred. And pretty soon, Haru would only respond to my exact doorbell sound, and that must come from that one specific location where the doorbell is mounted in the house. Okay. So he generalized at first, and then after we tormented the poor puppy, he discriminated and only responded to one doorbell and no other doorbells. Okay. Anyway, good boy. All right. Poor Haru, poor Haru. So here is an interesting example of classical conditioning, and it's similar to what, well, anyway, so here we go. Food and cats, okay? So what would happen is you use a can opener to open the cat food. So the sound of the can opener plus cat food equals happy cat. Sound of the can opener plus food equals happy cat. Pretty soon, sound of the can opener leads to a cat running across the house. Now, in the example that somebody gives, is that they store the cat food in a cabinet with a squeaky door. And so squeaky door plus can opener plus food equals happy cat. And so pretty soon what happens is you just open up the squeaky door and the cat comes running across the house. So pretty cool, pretty cool. Oh, here's a good one. Oh my God, this is another true one. Oh, can you believe that I was a Catholic schoolboy at one point in my life? St. Joseph's Elementary School. So I was in second grade. So well, we'll start with the unconditioned reflex first. If you have the flu, you're gonna vomit. Flu, bleh, flu, bleh. Unconditioned reflex, you don't gotta learn it, it just is. So here I was, 7 years old, right? And I know it's hard to imagine for you guys, but back in my day, Wednesday was the only day of the week that you could get chocolate milk. You could not get it any other day of the week. So it was very special. In fact, when I was 7 years old, I referred to Wednesdays as chocolate milk day. Okay, because that's how big a deal it was to my 7 year old self. And so I remember one day, I mean, I woke up and I was sick. I had the flu or something, but it's Wednesday. It's chocolate milk day. There is no way I am skipping chocolate milk day. I am going to chocolate milk day. So I went to school, St. Joseph's Elementary, and it's one of these great ones where you have a gym slash cafeteria. Awesome. So I drank my 1% chocolate milk. And then you know what? I had the flu and I vomited. Of course I did. All right. Guess what happens if I drink 1% chocolate milk right now? It's going to be a mess. Okay. It's going to be a real mess. And so it's amazing, because you've got, what was it? Food, salivate. Ding, ding, ding. Food, salivate. Ding, ding, ding. Salivate. All right. It's just really, that's all. It's the same idea. And we call this a taste aversion. And to me, what's really strange is that I also have generalization. It's not just if I drink 1% chocolate milk, I'm going to vomit. But if I smell 1% chocolate milk, I'll feel nauseous. If I see the sight of 1% chocolate milk, I'll be kind of queasy. Okay. So the more you get away from the exact 1% milk drinking, the more you pull away from. And it is crazy too, because 2% chocolate milk is awesome. You give me 2% milk and I'll whip in a little bit of Nestle Quick in there and I'm a happy man. But there's something about that 1%. It's just wrong. I mean, just looking at that carton makes me feel a little icky. Ooh, ooh, Besides, I think they probably make it with corn syrup or some shit like that. So, anyway, uh, John Watson was a famous psychologist in the early part of the 20th century, and he had some ideas that he was forming, and he heard some rumors about what was going on in Russia, right? And there ain't no Google or anything like that. So if you hear rumors about something going on in Russia, it's a lot of work to figure out what's going on. And he finally got a hold of some academic research papers about classical conditioning that were written by Ivan Pavlov. And so he translates those things and he brings the ideas of Pavlov to the United States, and he makes Pavlov see in Russia. Pavlov was not an important scientist. He just wasn't. He couldn't even get funded. I mean, the government of Russia wouldn't pay him. All right. It turned out that in order to fund his research, Ivan Pavlov had to sell the dog saliva. He sold it to peasants because they felt that it was like a medicine. If you consume some of this dog saliva, then all your problems will go away. My arm hurts. Rub some dog saliva on it. You'll feel better. And that was the only way he could pay for his research, was selling dog spit. I'm like, that's so sad, okay? Well, when John Watson finds him and finds his work and brings it to the United States, he all of a sudden becomes a major player, okay? A major, major player. And so John Watson, he felt psychology is an objective science, okay? That it is not it's not philosophy. Psychology is not philosophy. It is very much a hardcore science. And by the way, it's a STEM discipline, believe it or not. Psychology is a STEM field, right? Science, technology, education, mathematics. You'd have to trust me. It is a STEM field. Okay. And so he felt that you should never study unobservable mental processes. When it came to those dogs and Pavlov and the salivating, we never had any conversation of, oh, well, then the dog is excited and happy because food. No, it's a reflex. It just, I measure an external behavior salivate. That is it. I do not pretend to know or try to understand what is going on in a dog's brain. I just know food, ding, 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 food, salivate. I just know salivate. There's my observable behavior. And so he's a very, very influential person in the history of psychology that basically said, if you cannot observe it, you should not study it. Huh? So that's a controversial thing. He also proposed this notion of radical environmentalism. He says, here's a famous quote, but I mean, it's longer than it needs to be. But give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train them to become any type of specialist you might select: doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar, man, thief, regardless of his talents, pensions, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors. Whew, But what he's arguing is that human beings are 100% the product of the environment they were raised in. Okay. So on the nature nurture argument, he is a nurture guy. Okay. He basically says when an infant is born, they are born with just a few really basic reflexes. Okay. And so he describes three of these reflexes. He said, when a baby is born, that if you stroke and pat them, it will reflexively trigger a love response from an infant. If you constrict their movement, if you hold it so that they can't move, you will reflexively trigger rage in an infant. And if you play really loud sounds, you will produce fear in an infant. So he says fear, rage, and love are reflexively produced emotions. After that, everything else is a product of learned associations across your lifetime. Okay, so he's the ultimate, what am I trying to say? Nature nurture, the nurture guy. Okay, he's the ultimate nurture guy. Nature gives you a few reflexes, but after that, forget it. So he wants to demonstrate this in a laboratory. So what he does is he's got this baby, this poor little baby Albert. Okay, this kid's name is Albert. Albert was a patient. Was he a patient? I think he was a patient in this hospital, in the hospital that John Watson was working in. And so what happens is he brings in baby Albert, and he sneaks up behind little baby Albert with a hammer and a great big metal bar. Okay? And I know what you're thinking, but he ain't gonna be hitting the baby, all right? So I ain't gonna hit. No. He sneaks up behind the baby, then he takes the metal bar and the hammer, dong, like this, a really loud sound. Loud sound triggers fear. Okay, that's one of those three reflexive emotions that John Watson referred to. Okay, cool. So an unconditioned reflex. Then he brings out a rat, a white rat. And oh my God, Albert loved this thing. It was so cute. I mean, it was furry and cuddly and sweet and warm. Come on, rats are pretty cool unless somebody tells you they're not. Okay, they're really sweet. Oh yeah, they also carry disease, but that's another story. But on the surface of it, it's pretty darn cute. Okay. So Albert's playing with the rat, and I mean, here's an interesting image, right? Albert's playing with the rat, and look at John Watson. Dong. And so loud noise, fear. Okay, this is still that unconditioned reflex. You just added a neutral stimulus to the front end. So this is acquisition. So you have to do this about 5 times. And after about the 5th time, what happens is, remember during acquisition, this rat started as a neutral stimulus, but after acquisition, it becomes a conditioned stimulus. Okay. And so as we move forward, when you bring the rat out after about 5 trials of this, you bring the rat out, and the Albert is just like, hell no. Albert is not just afraid, but Albert is just running as fast. Oh, he can't run, he can crawl. He's just crawling as fast as he can to get away from that rat. Okay. So I like this picture. Oh, a menacing rat. Whoever wrote that has a sixth sense of humor. So now, after doing this procedure and acquiring this fear, as demonstrated right here, he then found out that Albert was not just afraid of white rats, but his fear would generalize. Okay. And it generalized to white rabbits. Oh, but it also generalized. Look at this. This is a little bunny rabbit mask, right? But he also had a Santa Claus mask. And Albert was afraid of Santa Claus now because of Santa Claus's bushy white beard. And when mom comes to pick him up at the end of the day, she bends over to get him. And Albert's like, no way. There is no way she is going to pick me up. And they couldn't fit. And then mom took off her coat, and then Albert was okay with it because her coat had a fur collar on it. And so all of a sudden, fur was setting them off. And it was like, crazy, man. Oh yeah, here's a Santa Claus mask. All I can tell you is that a Santa Claus mask and a bunny mask in the 1920s are scary, scary things. Those are frightening looking. That what does not lead to feelings of jolly Santa Claus. Scares the living shit out of me. Oh, I love that. So this classical conditioning, as I said, is a very important part of the associative learning process. Huh? So I'm going to move a little bit, just a little bit, into operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is the things that I'm much more familiar with. My entire PhD dissertation work, I was working with pigeons in operant conditioning on a daily, 7 days a week basis, 7 days a week. So as we said, with operant conditioning, we often call it operant conditioning because a person, or an animal's behavior operates on the environment. As I said, this is active learning. If you don't do something, then the outcome or consequence won't occur. Okay. So this is a clever little, I thought it was clever, but behaviors lead to consequences. Sitting through boring meetings leads to free food. COVID took that away too. So there's this guy, Edward Thorndike. And Edward Thorndike is studying cats. He takes cats and he puts them into an apparatus kind of like this. He calls it a puzzle box. And it's pretty amusing. They have some videos on YouTube of cats in puzzle boxes. Maybe I'll pull one up because you know what? Oh wait, no. Hold on a second. Stop sharing because I didn't share my sound. YouTube. Okay.
But how is a new skill learned? That was a question which began to fascinate Thorndike. To answer it, he built some ingenious puzzle boxes from which cats could only escape by operating latches.
And in you go.
The cat appears to be very clever in engineering its escape, solving the problem with a deftly placed paw and a push of its nose. But Thorndike didn't believe that an animal, even a clever cat, understands the consequences of its behavior. When he placed a cat in the puzzle box for the first time, Thorndike was unable to see any evidence of flashes of insight. The successful actions appeared first by chance. He proved that the apparent cleverness arose by trial and error, and used graphs to measure the rate of learning. A well-practiced cat quickly recalls the actions that help it escape to its reward of food. If an action brings a reward, Thorndike believed that that action becomes stamped into the mind. In his thesis, he explained further his ideas about learning, that behavior changes because...
All right, that is awesome. I love those little kitties in puzzle boxes. And so you see here what he did was he was putting them in this box and then, across, what is it, 25 times here. And here, time required to get out of the box. And so the first day it was like 240 seconds. So that's what, 4 minutes? No, 20, 40, yeah, 4 minutes. Okay. 4 minutes. Da, 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 da. And by the time, look at that, you get down here, the cat basically just gets put in the box, clunk, clunk, pull, done, walks out. And so he created what he calls the law of effect, right? And the law of effect basically says if a behavior is followed by a satisfying, if you perform a behavior and a good thing follows it, you're more likely to do that behavior again. If you do a behavior and it is followed by bad things, then it is less likely that you will do that behavior again. This sounds to me like rewards and punishments. Okay. And that's exactly what it is. The idea is the consequences of a behavior influence how often we exhibit a behavior. Okay. So we do something, good stuff happens, we repeat that behavior. That's it. We do stuff, it's followed by bad stuff, we stop doing it. Okay? So behavior is controlled by its consequences. We see that B.F. Skinner took the work of Thorndike and Watson to a lesser degree, but Thorndike, and formalized it. He brought it into, and I mean, B.F. Skinner took John Watts's idea of behaviorism to the extreme. If you cannot measure it, you should not study it. If it is not a quantifiable behavior that is exhibited by an organism, you have no business studying it. And so, from a very rigid behavioral training, I was trained in a very rigid behavioral laboratory, and I've gotten much more flexible. But it was very clear when my research, my dissertation advisor was Howie Racklin, and if you went into Howie's lab and you said, "Oh, the dog wagged its tail because it was happy," oh my God, what do you know about happy in a dog? You don't know if the dog is happy. You know, yummy treat, dog wag tail. Done. That is all you know. You have no clue what is happening up inside of that dog. You have no business trying to talk about it or study it. Okay. So, yep, very interesting. So we see that what B.F. Skinner did was he created these apparatuses for studying animal behavior or learning. In particular, in fact, I'm going to pull up an operant conditioning chamber with pigeons because I spent untold numbers of hours with pigeon operant conditioning chamber. This is pretty old school, but let's check it out.
And we're going to try another pigeon now. And I will try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and
Skinner,
make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird.
Oh, no, this isn't a Skinner box, but that's all right.
This bird has been already conditioned to eat when the magazine sounds and the light flashes. Now we'll just watch its behavior a bit. It's not doing anything in particular, you see. But I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn. What I do is simply, as I did then, to wait for some part of that behavior. There's more of it, you see. You can see that the effect is instantaneous. I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now. And then I reinforce that movement. And I wait for a more pronounced movement than that. It's got to be more than that. There we go, all the way around.
You see that? They got a pigeon walking in circles. I am so impressed that he's able to do that. I don't know that I could have gotten that job done. Let me try that again. Let's see. I seem to remember this one somewhere.
You might define reading as the ability to emit an appropriate differential response to written commands. On the other hand, if you saw a pigeon do this, you might not. Originally, this was a hue of discrimination. The word peck was printed in red and the word turn in black. We gradually blackened the letters of peck as discrimination training proceeded. Actually, pigeons are capable of good pattern discrimination, and we could probably have gotten this discrimination by starting with all the letters the same color, even though the words are the same length. This performance was established by 2 undergraduates in approximately 5 hours.
5 hours to teach the pigeons to read.
An SD is a stimulus in the presence of which...
Can you imagine that? 5 hours to teach a pigeon to read. Oh my God. Do I have rat? No. Okay, well, I have one in here. Maybe not. Press the lever, buddy. Oh, they're using water as a reinforcer. Wow. So they're reinforcing this rat for picking up a rod and moving it around the cage. So in operant conditioning chambers here, they designed them. None of those were really operant conditioning chambers per se. They were similar ideas, but they weren't quite exactly. In a traditional operant conditioning chamber, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lever here, a little bar, and the rat must press that bar. And if the rat presses that bar, then it will get reinforced. Okay. So behavior is controlled by its consequences. The act of pressing the bar is controlled by the consequences of receiving the food. Or in the case of that rat just now, the behavior of picking up that metal rod was controlled by the consequences of receiving water. They must have made the rat thirsty before they put him in there. Here we've got a pigeon's box, operant chamber, often called a Skinner box, but operant conditioning chamber. And in this one, it's, okay, you can see a little bit here. What happens is there's little lighted discs here, little keys that the pigeons can peck at. And then you basically write a computer program telling it what to happen. And so then pecking on these keys can lead to, this is food here. This is mixed grain, just like bird seed, right? And so when the way it's positioned right now, the pigeon puts its head into this hole, but would not be able to get any food. There's nothing to be eaten there. But when this apparatus turns on, it kind of moves. It swings up. And when it swings up, then the pigeon can get food through this hole. And so the pigeon's behaviors of pecking keys are what leads to this thing going up. In my dissertation work, I used an apparatus like this, and there would be multiple keys inside of that box. And then if the pigeon makes different decisions, then different outcomes occur. Okay, so I was studying decision making, and for me, if a pigeon pecked at a red key, then this thing came up immediately, and they got access for 2 seconds. But if the pigeon pecked at a green key, then there was a 4 second delay, and then the pigeon got access to 4 seconds in this hopper. So I was studying self control in a pigeon, believe it or not, self control. And so the red key was a rather impulsive choice because it gave you food immediately, but it only gave you 2 seconds. Green would be more of a self-controlled choice. And so, you peck green, you got to wait for it, but the reinforcement you get for pecking green is larger, but you got to wait for it. And so it was mimicking the notion of impulsive and self-controlled decision making. All right, very cool, very cool. And by the way, pigeon behavior was no different. I did some studies with humans, some studies with pigeons, and results were very, very similar. Human beings can wait more than 4 seconds, right? Pigeons can't wait much more than 4 seconds. But other than the fact that the time frames were different, the processes were identical processes involved. Very cool stuff. So I'm not going there because that opens, if I move to the next slide, I'm opening up an entire new door, and I don't want to go there. Okay, I just don't want to open that door up. So we'll say have a good weekend at this point. Got any questions before we log off? Because you've been so talkative today. That was me being sarcastic. All right. At least Ryan is still there and John is still there. I'm happy. Okay, good. All right. Whew, I have 4 people in attendance today. All right, very cool. Actually, let me check that to see if anybody else popped in while I wasn't looking. Oh, did I get you? There, got you. Yep, got y'all. All right. So have a good weekend. We will get back in person, I hope, on Tuesday. And we'll finish up some operant conditioning and then move into some observational learning, which is awesome too. Okay. So I will see you next time. Okay. I'm going to, you know what I mean? Stay warm. Yeah, I ain't going to go outside, buddy. That's how I'm going to stay warm.